Activate the servitors and alert the engine seer. Today we look at one of my favorite phases of the game, the damage control phase. Damage control only applies to units with plasma reactors, so you won't be activating any knights in this phase of the game. Sorry, banner and lance players, you'll be sitting this one out. The player that activates a unit first is the player that is given the initiative for that game turn. In this case, we'll go player 2. So player 2 would activate one of their titans or units, then alternate with player 1 until one of them runs out of activations, at which point the player that still has activations remaining would just activate all of their units that this applies to. I actually had to look this one up, but squadrons are activated together in the repair phase. So when it comes your turn for an activation, if you're running a squadron, you would actually conduct damage control for all of the models in that squadron at once, and then it would default to your opponent. Rules as written for this phase say that you actually are supposed to alternate one unit at a time with your opponent, but if you want to speed up your game and you're playing with, say, a friend that you game with quite frequently, feel free to just activate all of your titans at once at the same time as your opponent. You'll find this really speeds up the game. But keep in mind, if you find yourself in a tournament setting, you probably are better off doing one activation at a time. When a unit's activated in the damage control phase, the first thing you have to do is a Reactor Overload check. This applies to titans that are running pretty hot. There's a chance they may encounter problems with their plasma reactor or various other systems. And if your titan is running extremely hot, there's a chance that even a perfectly undamaged titan may cause itself to explode from inside. After a titan's activated in damage control, the first thing you want to do is take a look at that titan's plasma reactor track. If the plasma reactor is in a orange or red position, then that titan will actually have to do a reactor check. If it's in the green and yellow, then you don't have to do this check and you can just move on to the next step. If your reactor is in an orange position, then you only have to roll a d6 die and consult the Reactor Overload table found on page 43 in the main rulebook. You'll notice that in this position of orange, there is no chance of your titan self-destructing and exploding on the tabletop, but there are quite a series of other negative effects that will happen. If your reactor is in the red position and about to boil off of its engine mounts, you would now have to roll a d10 instead of a d6. There's now a chance that your Titan's reactor may have a meltdown and a perfectly undamaged Titan may explode on the tabletop. The larger the Titan, the larger the explosion and units affected. After you've done your reactor check, you can now start rolling some dice to attempt repair actions. The amount of dice you roll will change from Titan class to Titan class, but the spot where you find this number is the same on every Titan's command terminal. You just have to see where it says Servitor Clades, and the number underneath that is the amount of dice you get to roll for your repair actions. The dice themselves can be used to repair various Titan systems and locations. You can do things like vent plasma, up your void shields or relight them, repair disabled weapons, and take care of certain locations and critical damage. The first action we'll look at is vent plasma. This will allow you to keep your reactor cool and avoid those potentially destructive reactor checks. To do this, you would need a die roll of 4+, so 4, 5, and 6s, and for each die you roll, you can move your reactor one position closer to the green. A Titan's best defense is its void shields. If your void shields are currently collapsed in the location with an X beside it, then you can use a die roll of 6 to reignite your shields and move them up one level. If your void shields are currently active, then you can use 5s and 6s to boost them by 1 level for each die roll of a 5 or a 6. Occasionally your opponent will land a good solid hit on one of your Titan's weapons, causing it to be disabled. The roll required to fix one of your disabled weapons will differ from weapon to weapon. Typically you'll have your weapon cards, and if you have the blue side facing up, the weapon is operational and you can fire with it. If the weapon's disabled, you will have the red side facing up, showing that you can't fire with it. You can find the repair roll required to get that weapon operational just on the bottom next to repair weapon. In the case of a Bellicosa Volcano Cannon here, it needs a 5+, so 5s and 6s will do it. If you roll a 5 or 6, then you can spend that die to get that weapon back online and operational to shoot again. The last area you can repair is critical damage. Most Titans have 3 locations where you can do this. They're legs, body, and head. These are the kind of triangular tracks next to your structure point rail. So for every die roll of a 5 or a 6, you can minimize this by 1 position. And if you're actually in the first position of your critical track rail, then you can remove the critical damage altogether. Now that you know your repair options, let's go through an example of how this will actually look on the tabletop. Say it's your turn to activate a Titan, and you've chosen to activate your Warlord Titan. First thing you would do is a reactor check. Because this Warlord's reactor is in the orange, you'll be rolling a d6 instead of a d10 on the Reactor Overload table. The result I got is a 5. So this Warlord will experience a power failure, and its voids will collapse immediately, and I'll just reflect that on the command terminal. Next thing you want to look at after your overload check is how many servitors your Titan class has, and that's found on the command terminal. The Warlord has a servitor clade of 4, meaning I will get 4 die to roll in an attempt to repair some systems. And here's my results: a 2, 5, 4, and a 6. The first thing I like to do when making repair rolls is eliminate the dice that I can't use for any actions. In this case, it would be a 2. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there may be some weapons you can actually repair on a 2, but it doesn't apply to this Warlord, so I'll just exit out. The next thing I like to do is start with my highest die roll. In this case, it's a 6, and the reason I do this is because your highest roll lets you focus on whatever you really need to get done, or what's most important for you going into the next turn. In this case, I have a 6, so I basically have all the options available. I can repair anything I want. Because Void Shields are a Titan's best defense, I'll use that 6 to reignite my Void Shields, as a 6 is the only die roll I can use to do this, and I don't know if I'm going to get another one down the line. My next highest die roll is a 5. In this case, once again, I have all options available. I can pretty much do whatever I want, and this one's going to be a little more tricky to spend. I could use it for Void Shields, but frankly, if a gun can blow through 1 level of Void Shields, it can blow through 2 levels of Void Shields, and either way I'm just going to waste 1 weapon of my opponent's combat phase. So I'll probably use this somewhere else. I would say in this case, because the Warlord's only 2 hits away, or 2 critical hits away from exploding in its body, I'll spend it on the critical hit in the body and restore that up 1 level. The last die I have to allocate is a 4, and this one's going to be kind of situational. Unless there's a Titan on the board and I really need to drop its shields, and my Warlord is the only way of doing that, I'm probably going to spend this on the Warlord's reactor. and this is for a few reasons. One, it may give me the option of firing that Bellicosa cannon and not putting my reactor in the red. Two, if I don't need to fire that Bellicosa cannon, then I've now moved my reactor into the yellow, and next repair phase I won't have to do an overload check on the reactor, which would potentially let me do some pretty good repair actions elsewhere. Like, it's probably a safe bet I'm going to have to reignite my voids. So, in this case, I'll bump up the Warlord's reactor one more point and cool it off. At this point, I've used my full dice pool for repair actions. It would now default to my opponent to activate one of their titans and carry out damage control, and we'll just keep alternating back and forth following the same steps until we're both done doing everything we need to do for damage control. I'll leave you guys with the slide of where we started with this Warlord and where we ended up. The damage control phase is, next to alternate activation, one of my favorite aspects of this game. It really forces you to make some pretty difficult decisions. Your best bet tends to be prioritizing what you need to get done in the upcoming combat phase, but if you can look further into the game to the next turn and try and set yourself up, you'll find damage control really sets you up for success. Next topic we're looking at is the combat phase. That's everything for today's topic. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, or if you're interested in more Titanicus content and how to play, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you on the next one.